Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this FlashUp.com Mr. Pandaria raiding guide. And in this video we're going to be taking a look at the heroic mode version of Immerseus in the Siege of Orgrimmar raid. Now in order to complete this fight you're going to want to take 2 tanks, 2 to 3 healers. We took 3 for our kills, we just found it easier. It extends the fight a little bit, but you know, it outweighs wiping because you can't heal through any damage. And then the remaining a mixture of both melee and ranged DPS. Now this guide is going to assume that you have an understanding of the normal mode version of this fight, so if you don't, I recommend you go to flaskup.com, check out the written guide, or check out the video guide that is available on this channel. Now first of all we're going to take a look at phase 1, and the first ability that comes to mind here is your generic tank swap. Just like in the normal mode, your tanks will have to swap on the frontal cone corrosive blast ability. However, you will need to ensure that you are swapping on one stack in the heroic mode due to the amount of damage that you actually take from it. He'll still also do his abilities like the swirl ability, which is the little shits on the floor that you need to make sure you're not standing in. However, this does deal a lot more damage in heroic mode, so again, make sure you're not getting hit by this. And also his frontal cone kind of ability that will knock you back and hit you also does a lot of damage, so again, try and avoid this where possible. It's worth noting that it will always go in a clockwise direction, so if you see it spawning you should move and adjust yourself accordingly. Now during this phase on heroic mode, Immerseus gains a new ability that you'll have to deal with, and this is called Swelling Corruption. Now this will cause Immerseus to surge with power. He'll kind of hulk up but not turn green because he's blue, and water, different story, different day. And this will cause him to gain stacks of Swelling Corruption, which is proportional to his current corruption level. Now, while Swelling Corruption is active, if players attack Immerseus, they will gain stacks of a debuff, and this debuff ramps up pretty fast in the amount of damage it deals, as in it's not linear. So for one stack it may deal something small like 15k every second. And then if you got 2 stacks, it could deal 60k every second. And I think we found out when we were fighting this boss that when you had 3 to 4 stacks, it was dealing like 300k to 500k every second. So you need to make sure that you don't let your stacks of this debuff go high. And this is done by not single targeting the boss with damaging abilities when Swelling Corruption is active. The debuff only lasts for 6 seconds and it can be dispelled. Now, when you have this debuff on you and you attack the boss, you will spawn a congealed Shah creature, and these just kind of flock at your raid. Like, it's kind of a mad... If you think of Zerglings in StarCraft 2, they're a little bit like that. They just run at your raid and try and kill everything. So your tanks, the tank mainly the one that's not currently tanking the boss, should make sure that they're picking up as many of these as possible. And then if they take them to Immerseus, you can AoE damage them next to him, and that won't cause you to get stacks of this Swelling Corruption. So AoE damage is fine to Immerseus, just any form of single targeting is a no-no. Now ideally, you want the Swelling Corruption to be removed from him as fast as possible, so that everyone can start single targeting him again. And the only way to actually remove the Swelling Corruption is by dealing damage to him. So what we did is, in this video that you can probably see in the background, you might have already picked up on it, is that we have our mage constantly single targeting Immerseus like while he has his Swelling Corruption on him, and everyone else deals with the adds that spawn. And then when the mage reaches 4 to 5 stacks of the Swelling Corruption debuff, we dispel him and he'll keep on damaging the boss again. This way it reduces his stacks very, very fast. I think we have like only one kind of quote unquote wave of adds spawn, which is still quite a few of them. So you need to make sure that the adds are being killed off in time, and this one player who I guess needs to be kind of high on single target DPS should just focus on Immerseus and work on bringing down his Swelling Corruption stacks as fast as possible. It could also be worth using Time Warp Bloodlust Terrorism for the first Swelling Corruption, because if you do decent raid damage as a whole, then you shouldn't have another Swelling Corruption during this first phase 1. Again, during this phase, he will still cast his Shah Bolt ability from the normal mode version of this fight. However, the Shah pools will deal a lot more damage, and we think they spawn like at a faster rate, so that is something you will have to keep an eye out for. Now, because the phases do go on for longer, you will need to make sure that you have enough room to move around. And again, something else that you might be able to pick up on in this video is that we don't kind of fight Immerseus in different quadrants around the room, or the eighths of the room, or whatever they are. We don't like group up at the entrance to Immerseus. We move to the very back of the room, where there's a kind of open area which is the same kind of width as 2 or 3 of the smaller quadrants of the room. So you need to kind of use the space as best as you possibly can, spread out, and make sure you're not standing in the sharp pools and taking unnecessary damage. We also found it was easier for the tanks to pick up the adds at spawn if people are kind of close together, so you can try kind of moving as a group with the sharp pools at spawn, but it's not really recommended. If you can stay loosely stacked, which is a term I kind of like to use from time to time, then it will help you pick up the adds and they won't be running freely in the raid. Now, phase 2 of this fight is pretty much the same as normal mode, however there is kind of one new ability that you have to be aware of, and this is called Char Pool. And this is the pool of water that is on top of where Immerseus splits and disappears, and every time one of the little blobs from around the room makes it to the centre of the room where Immerseus is in order to reform, the Char Pool will grow over time, slowly but surely, and this is every time one of the little blobs actually reaches it. And if anyone is to stand in this Char Pool, it will inflict a small amount of shadow damage to start with, and then it also kind of stacks and increases rapidly in damage as well, which is proportional to the number of stacks that you have. However, if you do stand in the Char Pool, it causes it to shrink. But when we killed this boss, we didn't really care for this ability too much, because it wasn't something that we had to majorly pay attention to, like, okay, this is getting too big, you need to go in here now. But it's always useful having some people on standby to stand in the Char Pool in order to cause it to shrink if you do let too many of the little blobby puddle things reach it. So that is just something to keep in mind. You should also keep in mind that the damage that is dealt to your raid when the puddles reach the centre of the room is quite higher in heroic mode, because, you know, heroic mode, it's a step up from normal mode. So you should make sure that during this phase people are topped off as much as you possibly can, and that people's health doesn't drop too low. You should also be making sure that you are making the most of your buffs that you can gain, like I don't in this video, by standing next to the puddles when they die, as you gain a damage increasing buff from standing next to the black puddles, and you gain a healing buff if you stand next to the blue puddles, just like in the normal mode. So this will help you heal and kill the puddles at a much faster rate. So that's going to do it for this Mr. Pandaria raiding guide. If you would like to view a written version of this guide, then you can head on over to flaskup.com or click on the link in the video description below. Alternatively, if you'd like to view any of our other heroic mode guides as and when they do go live, then please do feel free to click on any of the annotations that are on screen now. Thank you for watching, and if you're interested in future Mr. Pandaria raiding guides, then please do feel free to subscribe to the channel.